Hello, and welcome to this special edition of CBTV. I'm Matthew J. Rettick, the host of Checks and Balances TV. Today, I'll be presenting our newest installment of the Truth About series. We have an exciting yet controversial topic to discuss, which millions of Americans own today. What would that be? Mutual funds. So get ready for the truth about mutual funds. I'm going to give you the pros and cons, both sides of the coin, the advantages and disadvantages of this useful but many times misunderstood financial product. By the way, you can download our free report on the truth about mutual funds in the download section of our website. All right, first of all, what is a mutual fund? Well, simply a mutual fund is a basket that holds at least 20 different investments. They could be stocks, bonds, or other mutual funds, or any combination. Now, why 20? Well, the Investment Company Act of 1940 says that no more than 5% of a mutual fund can be invested in any one single security. Mutual funds, by the way, come in every color of the financial rainbow. There are stock and bond funds. You can own a fund invested in either large companies or small companies. There are funds that invest in foreign countries and foreign companies. And there are funds that invest in gold and silver. The choices are almost endless. While we could divide the mutual fund world into many different categories, here we'll stick to some basics. Now let's talk about the history of mutual funds, and this is rather interesting. The earliest known use of something resembling a mutual fund happened in the 1800s in the Netherlands. It was based on the idea of unity creates strength. So began a new era in saving and investing. The modern era of mutual funds began in Boston in 1924 with the creation of the Massachusetts Investors Trust, now known as MFS Investment Management, a fund and manager still in business today. In the U.S. alone, there are more than 10,000 mutual funds, and fund holdings are measured in the trillions of dollars. Mutual funds still stand as the most popular and widely used investment vehicle today. Now let's talk about no-load funds versus loaded mutual funds, and there is a difference. No-load funds are usually purchased directly from the mutual fund company by simply calling their toll-free phone number and speaking with one of their representatives, or going to the mutual fund's website and placing your order, potentially without any interaction with a live person. You could call these funds no-help funds because the people on the other end of the phone are actually prohibited from giving you investment advice. Your decisions to buy or sell any fund are always your own. A no-load mutual fund is called that because there is no upfront sales load or charge. A load is just really a nice way of saying a commission. A no-load mutual fund means that when you invest $1,000 into a fund, the full $1,000 goes into your account. Since no broker or advisor gave you any investment advice or actually sold you the fund, no commission needs to be paid, hence the term no load. On the other hand, there are also load funds. These are typically sold by a stockbroker or advisor. You buy a load fund when you want advice, and advice, as you know, isn't free. In order to compensate your salesperson, the fund will most often charge you in one of three ways in order to pay for their advice. All right, now there are three methods of mutual fund sales charges. Let's talk about each of them very quickly. The first method are known as A-shares. A-share mutual funds were the first kind offered to the public. Why? Because they're simple. It works this way. At the moment you purchase the fund, they will charge you an upfront fee. This fee is then split three ways between your advisor's broker-dealer, and a broker-dealer is a firm like Merrill Lynch, Edward Jones, or Raymond James, and many others, and the third party who has to get paid is the mutual fund company itself. Now, these upfront fees are deducted directly from the amount you invest. So, for example, if the fund has a, let's say, 6% upfront sales load and you invest $1,000, a $60 fee will be deducted from your deposit and your account will open up with a beginning balance of $940. A-share upfront fees, by the way, range from as low as 2% to as high as 8.5%. There is, though, actually some good news here. You know how when you buy a dozen donuts, it's usually cheaper when buying a dozen versus just buying one at a time? Well, mutual funds work the same way. The more you invest, the smaller the sales load or charge. Now let's talk about method two, which are B-share mutual funds. Sometimes an advisor will offer you a mutual fund that has no upfront sales charge at all. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? These are known as back-end load funds or mutual funds with a contingent deferred sales charge. These funds charge no commission load to you up front. They only charge a sales load if you sell the funds within the first 6 or 7 years. However, the mutual funds that don't charge upfront loads usually add an extra 1% per year in addition to charging you a back-end load of 6 to 7% if you sell in the first year, declining to 0% by the 7th year. Now, remember the old Fram oil filter commercial? You can pay me now or you can pay me later. Here you may be paying now and paying later. With back-end load funds, instead of paying 6% in advance only on your deposits, you're getting hit with an extra 1% per year, not only on your deposits, but on all of your future growth as well. And these back-end load funds do not have break-point discounts, where with an A-share fund, you may have a reduced sales charge from, say, 6% down to 2.5% by virtue of investment amount breakpoints. So, why would an advisor sell you these back-end load funds? The answer is simple, but sad. These funds pay full commissions to the advisor and are never reduced by breakpoint discounts. You see, when you pay less, the broker makes less. Again, beware of back-end load funds. They are usually a better deal for the broker than for you. And then there's method 3, which are C-share mutual funds. C-share funds generally don't charge a front-end or back-end load. However, they normally charge 1% per year on the total account value, including all of your future growth. Now, if you're only going to own a fund for a few years, these funds could save you some money. But if you own them for more than 5 years, and especially if they have good growth, you may have been better off buying the upfront commission as in an A-share and getting it over with upfront. Now, to recap, no-load funds don't charge an upfront sales commission. Load funds do charge sales commissions, which can come in 3 main varieties: the upfront load, the back-end load, and the annual load. Again, for even more information about mutual funds, download our free report, The Truth About Mutual Funds. Now let's talk about fees and expenses to own a mutual fund. There are several different kinds of fees and expenses when you own a mutual fund. First, there is a management fee, also known as the expense ratio. This is a fee the mutual fund charges investors every year to operate the fund and make decisions as to what to buy and sell. Management fees range from as low as 0.08% for an unmanaged index fund to as high as 3% or more for some of the more exotic funds. On average, it's common to see management fees in the neighborhood of about 1% to 1.5% per year. The next type of fee is called the 12B1 fee. This is a charge based on the value of your account every year that provides money to the mutual fund company to advertise and promote the fund. Can you imagine that? But they do. The maximum 12B1 fee is 1%. And there's another type of expense that is charged to mutual fund investors. These are called transaction costs, and they can be very difficult to determine because the fund companies are not required by law to disclose them in the same way they must disclose management fees or 12B1 fees. Now, transaction costs are related to how often the fund buys and sells the assets within your mutual fund. And every time the fund manager buys or sells a stock or a bond, they incur a sales cost, and they pass the cost of those transactions on to you. So beware, transaction costs often double the expense of the fund. Now, you may be wondering, what do mutual funds actually invest in? Well, let's talk about that now. As I mentioned earlier, there are many different types of mutual funds out there, and mutual funds invest in practically just about anything and everything. Mutual funds generally fall into the following categories: money market funds, bond funds, stock funds, balanced funds, and asset allocation funds. Let's first of all talk about stock funds. As the name implies, stock mutual funds invest mainly in common stocks. The objective of a stock fund is long-term capital appreciation versus generating income, such as dividends, which are more common with bond funds. Now, there are 4 basic types of stock funds. First of all, there are large cap funds. These primarily invest in blue chip companies, large, well-known industrials, utilities, technology, and financial services companies with large market capitalization. Large cap stocks are perceived to be less risky than smaller capitalized companies. Then you have mid-cap funds. These primarily invest in companies whose market capitalization is smaller than large caps, but larger than small caps. Mid-caps are generally considered more risky than large-cap stocks, but have a higher return expectation. Then you have small-cap funds. These primarily invest in emerging companies, thought to have potential for future growth and profit. Small caps are generally considered the riskiest stocks compared to larger capitalized firms, but carry the expectation of a higher return during a bull market. And then you have the international fund. These primarily invest in stocks traded on foreign exchanges, but purchased in the United States by U.S. fund companies. International funds are subject to additional risks, so be cautious. These are such as currency fluctuation, political instability, and the potential for illiquid markets. And then there are bond funds. Bond funds invest in various types of bonds issued by corporations, municipalities, and the U.S. government. Bond mutual funds are designed to provide investors with a steady stream of income versus capital gains. Now, there are three basic bond fund types. The first one is government bonds. These primarily invest in bonds issued by the U.S. Department of Treasury, as well as various federal agencies. Government bonds, by the way, are generally taxable. Then you have municipal bonds. These primarily invest in municipal bonds issued by state and local governments to fund projects such as schools, streets, highways, hospitals, bridges, and airports. Income generated from municipal bonds may be tax-free at both the federal and state level. And then you have corporate bonds. These primarily invest in bonds issued by corporations to help fund business activities. Income from corporate bonds are taxable. And then there are money market funds, and money market funds invest in short-term securities such as treasury bills. Most money market funds offer a higher rate of return, by the way, as far as interest than bank savings accounts, and some are free of federal or state taxes. But unlike bank savings accounts, money market funds are not FDIC insured. And then there's also balanced funds. These invest in a combination of stocks, bonds, and cash investments. And remember, for even more information about mutual funds, download our free report, The Truth About Mutual Funds. Now let's talk about the advantages of mutual funds. And there are two main advantages to owning mutual funds: instant diversification and professional management. With instant diversification, mutual funds have one advantage that is undeniable. When you buy a mutual fund, you are instantly diversifying between 20 different companies to as many as 250. And many studies have shown that once you own at least 20 different investments, you have achieved the maximum benefit of diversification, which is known as protecting yourself from the risk that you may lose your shirt if one of your investments tanks. A second valuable advantage to owning mutual funds is you're essentially hiring investment professionals to manage your money. These men and women are highly educated, intelligent, and have received special training. And since most people feel they are, for the most part, totally unqualified to choose investments, they feel much more comfortable letting a mutual fund manager make the decisions of what to buy and what to sell. Now let's talk about the reality of mutual funds and mutual fund managers. Mutual fund managers are generally measured against an unmanaged index with the same types of investments that their fund buys and sells. Now, as an investor, you can't actually buy an index, but you can buy an index fund. And these funds buy the same stocks in the same proportion as the S&P 500. And the performance is usually the same as the index itself, minus whatever the fund charges in management fees. And by the way, these fees are usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.5%, which means half of 1%. So they are cheap compared to actively managed funds, as we discussed earlier. So the real question should not be, can a mutual fund manager generate better returns than you could? It's this: can a professionally managed mutual fund generate better returns than the broad index? The answer is usually not. In fact, over a 5-year period, only 25% of mutual funds have generated better returns than the S&P 500. Unfortunately, it's impossible to know in advance which funds will be in the 25% that beat the index. Once more, for even more information about mutual funds, download our free report, The Truth About Mutual Funds. Now I want to talk to you about past performance pitfalls. This is a big red flag, so pay attention. For those of you who are inclined to look at the past performance of a mutual fund as a potential predictor of future results, be careful. If this is all the research you do, you must know one important fact. Looking at the long-term results of a mutual fund is a fool's game, a big waste of time, and in reality, dangerous. Past performance is never a guarantee of future results. And now I want to touch on a nasty 5-letter word, and that's taxes in regards to mutual funds. The last expense we'll discuss here is taxes. And if you own a mutual fund that is not in your IRA or other types of retirement accounts, then you will need to consider the effects of taxation on your mutual fund investments. Be aware of this. Mutual funds distribute at least 95% of all capital gains and dividends each year. And as the owner of the mutual fund, you will receive a tax bill in the form of a 1099. This means even if you didn't sell any of your mutual fund shares, you will be taxed on capital gains. Why? Because the fund manager sold some of those investments, which means that you're paying taxes on money you did not take out of the fund. If you didn't actually take any money out of the fund, that means this is really known as phantom income. Now, I realize that in years when the mutual fund grows by leaps and bounds, this is probably just fine with you. But when the fund loses money and you still get a tax bill, this has got to feel like a double whammy. And you know what? It is. You lost money and you're getting tagged with a tax bill. So in conclusion, there you have it, the truth about mutual funds. And you now know more than 90% of the population, and probably many financial advisors, or at least more than most financial advisors want you to know. Now, is knowledge power? No. Knowledge is only potential power. It's worthless unless you use it properly. So take this newfound knowledge and use it the next time you're looking at mutual fund investing. I know you'll find it invaluable. Now here's my action step for you. If you're going to purchase any type of mutual fund in the future, consider working with a competent professional financial advisor who can help you navigate through all of the different variations out there. Also, be sure to request our free report, The Truth About Mutual Funds, by logging on to our website and downloading this in-depth report. We want to arm you with the truth about this important financial product so you'll know if it's the right investment for you. And revisit the download section of our website for additional information and other Truth About reports on many popular investment products available today. And as a quick reminder, be sure to watch a new edition of Checks and Balances TV every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at checksandbalances.tv. Until then, spend less, save more, believe in yourself, and make it happen.